visual effects plays a really important part of this game in particular, even more so than the last two titles. The characters are more dramatic, there's big, larger-than-life characters, and there's also more exciting characters that you never were able to play before. And so our job in this game is to bring those things to life in a really spectacular way, in the same way that special effects bring a blockbuster movie to life. One of the highlights of this game is, of course, the Balrog. Visually, he's a very exciting character. The big challenge was to create the most realistic fire ever seen in a video game, and to really bring him to life and make him as convincing as he was in the movie. To start off with, I built elements of flame using Maya's fluid dynamics system. And so the advantage of using that as a starting point is that it recreates a really realistic way that flame actually moves. And so it has a lot of texture, and just the movement of it is really convincing. And so this is the basis of what I use for the flame in-game. Then I take it into our proprietary effects system and essentially build mini effects. Then I change it to a sort of like an X-ray mode where I can actually see his individual joints. So here you can see the different bones within his skeleton moving. This line that's coming out from his hand is actually his whip. And then what I can do is pick bone by bone and attach individual effects. So there's some emitting from different joints in his wings, there's some on his arms, on his legs, on his torso, glows on his eyes, and of course there's all kinds of fire coming off of his back and his sort of fiery mane. And then in addition to that, there's smoke that's pouring off of both legs, his torso, and his wings. So in total, there's probably 30 different miniature effects systems that all combine to give you the overall look of the Balrog. In previous games that I've worked on, once we start hitting around 2,000 particles, the frame rate starts to drag. We can push between 10 and 20,000 particles before we even begin to impact our frame rate. So that gives us a massive advantage over other games. Typically in a video game, flame is really recognizable as a looping, repeating pattern, and it tends to be really glowy and not very detailed. And so my goal was to make it have a lot of texture and a lot of movement and feel real and fluid and alive and dangerous. And so and I think we've accomplished that on this game.
For video games, you don't really know what's going to happen until it happens. The player is actually the mixer. The player is the one that is the director. They're changing the environment, they're changing the audio based on how they play. And we have to be prepared for that. All audio really is dialogue, music, and sound effects. Now, we have to take that and break it up and make some things interactive and some things linear, like a movie. So we'll break audio down into different categories. For instance, character audio, the footsteps, the grunts and the swings. We play those interactively from RAM. Detail like that, I think, is what makes these characters come to life. You see a certain sequence that happens the same way every time, we can stream that from disk. So for things that are linear, we bring the work into our higher-end audio studios. What we'll do is we'll capture that animation and do it in full surround sound. We have virtually unlimited audio tracks. We can use our whole arsenal of tools. And we have the opportunity to do that just like we would do audio for a movie. So for the last scene in Moria, we start off with just some general cave ambience. And that can be like a 3 to 4 minute loop that's streamed from disk. And on top of that, we have another disc stream loop that is the music track. Gandalf and the Balrog are battling there, and those are actual live characters making sounds from RAM as they're doing it. If I run the character far away, it gets softer and softer, and you can start to hear more of just the character sounds. But also, as you get closer and closer, the fire ambience changes and gets louder, it gets brighter, until you go right up to the Balrog, and it's a really loud, in-your-face, fiery sound. At the same time, we have the ability to change the mix of the entire game to help emphasize his attack. What we'll do is change the mix of the ambience and the music so that as he's flying up, everything else is coming way down, and then pretty soon all you hear is the wind and breeze because he's at the top of the mountain. And then as he's smashing down, all the music comes back in, and so we have real-time control of all this. And to me, I mean, you can have the greatest sounds you want in a video game, but if you don't have control of them, it doesn't make any difference. It's the control that we're really after. The biggest challenge for game audio is creating a seamless experience. Taking all these individual pieces, the RAM sound effects, the streamed audio, the music, the voiceover, and putting all that together and making it sound like you're really there.
Lord of the Rings: The Third Age is different than previous Lord of the Rings titles we've done in that it's an RPG. And critical to that genre is the idea of story. We look at the key moments that we want the player to experience. Those key moments become our in-game cinematics. From the script phase, we stay on paper and we go into the storyboard phase, where with pencil and paper, an artist will give us our first glimpse of what that scene or what that sequence is going to look like in-game. We then take the pencil sketches, cut them together with timing and with some scratch voiceover.
I can only kill them once.
And we use that as an in-game animatic that becomes a template for everything that comes afterwards. It gives us a sense of what we need from our characters. That drives how we cast those characters.
We've lost the deeping wall! They're almost through the gate!
Motion capture is a technique we use to capture realistic human motion for digital characters. Performance capture takes that a step further. We have an added dimension, and that's not just capturing the motion, but capturing the emotional performance, so that the character you see created digitally is really a representation of the actor and the actor's performance.
I can only kill them once.
Performance capture is a technique that's having one actor actually completely inhabit a digital character, create a digital character from the ground up. We took and extended that by creating sequences, just like you would a feature film sequence, but doing it in a digital way. Having actors create the characters, bringing in a live-action director to choreograph it, multiple actors, and a cameraman. We captured these entire sequences as integrated, cohesive sequences. We followed up then with facial motion capture.
I can only kill them once.
Tracking everything from lips and eyes, eyelashes, eyelids, nose, cheeks, mouth, so that the same actor that you see that performed the physical also added the voice and the facial detail.
I know not. Perhaps the ford and south to Edoras.
The actor is there giving the character a real life and a real authenticity that you just don't get in other types of motion capture. We can then take that sequence, pull it into the 3D environment, marry it with our digital characters, so when you see a character performing in the game, you're seeing one actor's complete representation of that character.
My friends and family have fled this place. Where are they bound? I know not. Perhaps the ford and south to Edoras.
That is our road.
Then you may join me. I must find them.
And I think it helps give us a much more fulfilling experience than we might otherwise get.
Every time we do this, we want to take it another step up. So we, even though we go back and look at everything we've done before, the idea is to make it just that much better this time around.
In the name of the Lady of the Galadriel.
There's a great focus on the characters because we get much closer to them than we have done before. So there's a lot more detail in our characters, I think, this year than ever before.
Then you may join me.
Morwayn is the Rohan Shield Maiden. We did a bunch of concept sketches on her. We look at a lot of production stills so that we make sure that the costumes are authentic, that a lot of the details, like the chainmail, for example, or the hand tooling on her breastplate on the leather, is all appropriate to what a Rohan shield maiden would wear. And then we take this to the modelers. She builds the basic model, and then she focuses on the textures to make sure that the colors are right, the materials are right, that everything's as close to the film as it can be. We take a lot of time with the faces on our characters. You'll see that there's a lot of detail that goes into them to make sure that the skin looks right, the hair looks right. They take a lot of time with the hair.
Hurry! A warrior is trapped here!
The process on the environment is slightly different because what we're starting with is a scene from the film, but we have to build a world that goes around that scene. With Helm's Deep, we actually had the advantage of having a model from Weta, which was the company that did all the visual effects for the films. Basing our block world on that model actually made our world 100% authentic to what you see in the film. We make sure that the proportions, the dimensions, and everything is right. Then we go and put in all the details, the texturing, the lighting. And then we added the atmosphere of the rain and the mist and all of that in conjunction with the lighting to get closer to what the film was. We are all great fans of the films ourselves, so we have some very high standards for ourselves that we try to meet every time.
Probably the biggest challenge in creating an RPG is dealing with all of the complexity of multiple characters and multiple stories and weaving those into a single fabric that's going to emotionally pay off for the player over somewhere between 60 and 80 hours of gameplay.
They have no chance!
I always started by going back to Peter Jackson's visualization of Middle-earth. So what we found is the building of miniatures and sort of mocking up the worlds helps the whole team kind of get on board with the big picture and sort of see how their contribution helps shape this whole larger landscape. One of the most amazing things that we saw in the films was realizing all of the corridors and the intricate construction of Helm's Deep. Now you're able to go in the front gate and literally explore every nook and cranny of Helm's Deep before the battle begins. There's an incredible wealth of detail that goes into constructing all of the bits of the world that then become the stage that our characters are placed upon and act upon. I think without that level of care and concern at every aspect of it, you'd have something that just wouldn't ring true at the end of the day.
I heard you were in Moria with Gandalf. How are you?
Well, what we wanted to do in creating characters for the game was to find the archetypes that exist in the various races that Peter Jackson put on the screen. We have the dwarves, we have the elves, we have the men, fallible and the heroic men, and in various scenes and role-playing experiences within the game, sort of throw them against each other and see what happened and give the player sort of an expanded sense of the role-playing that used to go on in the tabletop and can now go on in the electronic medium with these virtual reality characters.
We must defend the future of Gondor. Together.
We must save everyone that we can, or this village shall fall. The battle for Helm's Deep is over. The battle for Middle-earth is about to begin.
The beauty of working with Sir Ian was that he helped Peter Jackson create this character, and so being able to work with him, write lines for him, and have him evolve those into an insightful buddy performance that he has with the game player, where players will feel Gandalf is helping them figure out what's going on in Middle-earth.
Warning you of orcs ahead.
Being able to bring these emotional moments of life and death, loss, insight, heroic action to the player and let them really feel them is really what next generation gaming is going to be all about. So now's the time to take this great property and start mastering those techniques.
When we started Lord of the Rings: The Third Age, it was important to be able to quickly prototype and iterate on what the battle system was going to be. We had to basically get back to the beginnings of this kind of game and just sit down with pen and paper and some dice and some little figures and start figuring out what kind of statistics, what kind of values needed to go into each action that the characters would take during a combat scenario. In order to kind of move forward with the encounters, we needed to create a generic location that the designers could use to set up ideas. So we created something that we call our Battle Arena Test Level, which is essentially just a very generic kind of area that the designers can go in, place down characters, and try out different formations and combinations of enemies to see if it was fun. Before any designer can really get to work on the encounters, we sit down with an animator, talk about an enemy or player character, and then the animator goes ahead and crafts motions for that character. The designer will then take those animations and begin to do choreography with them. We call that our basic encounter template. Basically, the designer will sit down within the Battle Arena Test Level and start trying out different positions for the enemies and for the player characters in order to create something compelling and interesting for the player. So once we have the basic enemy placement and the choreography done, it's time to really bring out the feeling and emotion of the enemies. We take an encounter and begin to infuse it with all of the special abilities that the characters may have. So here you can see the Berserker exhibiting one of his special attacks, which is the Berserker Rage attack. In order to capture the essence of Helm's Deep, as you know from the films, there are waves and waves and waves of Uruk-hai kind of assaulting the keep. So one of our encounters, we needed to make sure that we kind of brought that to life. So we created these ladders, which are in effect spawners. And when the ladders come up, enemies will actually come up over the wall and fight the characters. So we layered in that movie element as a piece of gameplay, as you can see in the footage here. For me, as a game player, when I think of fun, I think of having to try different tactics, having to really try hard to defeat a scenario. And I think our game is going to have a lot of those challenges for the player. There's a lot of times where you're going to need to try out various different strategies in order to overcome an encounter. And I think that that really lends to replayability and adds a layer of difficulty to the game that people are going to enjoy.